Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy and welcome to this CSS tutorial on opacity. In CSS we can change the opacity or make elements transparent, so the transparency, if you like, of different elements. And we're not limited to which elements we can change the opacity of. We can change the opacity of images, divs, links, anything. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a couple of elements, and we're going to be taking a look at the opacity property, as well as a property that we need to use for Internet Explorer 8 and earlier. Okay, so let's go ahead and create an element. I'm just going to create a div here, and I'm going to assign a class to this div, and the class is going to be, let's say, opacity, just to make things simple. Okay, so I'm going to place some contents within this div, because the important thing is that when you apply a transparency or you give an opacity value to an element, anything that is contained within that element, i.e. this div here, will be changed as well. So we're going to place some text in here. So text in here. Let's go ahead and style this div up. Over to the browser, you can see that we've just got this text here. We'll go ahead and make some changes to this overall div, and then we'll set the opacity. So I'm going to go ahead and select opacity, and inside of here I'll just give it a width and a height, and that'll just mean that we can see it a lot easier. So I'll give it a width of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels, and let's go ahead and give this a background of black. And that way we can, monitor the transparency a bit better. Let's just refresh, and you can see that that has changed to black. Let's just go ahead and set the inner color to white, so we can actually see the text. And you can see that we've got some text in there now. Okay, so lastly I'll go ahead and give it some padding, and then we'll start to apply the transparency onto this element. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the transparency to 50%. Now there's obviously, like I said before, there's a couple of ways we need to do this. One's using the opacity property, and the second is using a filter in Internet Explorer, and this will provide support for Internet Explorer 8 and earlier. So let's go ahead and apply an opacity to this and see the property name, which is just opacity, and the value that we need to give this. Now you might think of an opacity as a percentage. If you've worked with any graphics programs, you might think of something like 50%. However, this isn't actually how we declare the opacity. We use a point value, so we use 0 point and then something. 0.5 is obviously going to halve the opacity, so we're going to have a 50% visible image. We can go sort of 0.9 for more visible, 0.1. So obviously the lower the number, the less visible it is. So let's keep it in the middle at 0.5 for now, and we'll go over to our browser and refresh, and you can see that the transparency has come through now. So we've got a 50% opacity on this element, and you've also noticed, well, hopefully noticed, that the text in there has faded as well. That's because, as I said, anything within the div is faded of its overall visibility. So, for example, if I go ahead and I create a link in here, you'll see that the default link color will be, it sort of fades that out a bit. So we've looked at opacity now. We know how to, change the appearance of an element. This can be applied to anything. It can be applied directly to text. So, for example, within a span, it can be applied to images, which is can be quite useful for hover effects, and it can also be applied to divs, as we've seen in this example. It could also be applied to the entire body. So if we were to go ahead and get rid of this opacity value here, let's say we wanted something to pop up and then we wanted to fade out the body, we can actually use an opacity on the entire body, and that will have the same effect here as nothing's changed, because it's faded, and obviously white can't fade to anything, and therefore it just looks the same, but that's quite a useful effect. Okay, so what about Internet Explorer 8 and earlier? At the time of recording, we still should be providing some support for this browser, so we need to use a filter. I'm not going to open up Internet Explorer and demonstrate, but I will show you the property. So go ahead, load up Internet Explorer and take a look at Internet Explorer 8. You can use the developer tools to go back a version, so you can go back to IE 8 and check that it works. So the property is filter, and the value that we're going to give this is alpha. So obviously we're dealing with the alpha of this, and then in brackets, not forgetting our semicolon on the end, we need to provide a value for the opacity value, or the property, I guess you could call it. So this is slightly different. It's not a point value, it's out of 100, so it's more like a percentage. So in our case, as we've looked at opacity 0.5, this would be opacity equals 50. So we're essentially saying 50% opacity. Obviously when I load up this in Chrome, nothing's happened, but what you would do is you would provide opacity and the value, and then you would sort of convert that over. So we've got 0.5 now, but this would also equal 50. So if we wanted a 70% opacity, likewise that would be 0.7. So this is the Internet Explorer 8 and lower fallback for the opacity. But for now, that's how we set elements with a certain opacity in CSS.